You won't believe what happens when a power-hungry cop crosses paths with a well-informed citizen who knows their rights. In this video, a female officer tries to assert her authority during a routine encounter, but things quickly take a turn when she's met with a calm yet confident refusal to comply. The citizen knows exactly where the law stands, leaving the officer visibly frustrated and scrambling to maintain control of the situation. As tensions rise, the officer's attempts to intimidate are met with facts and clarity, creating a standoff that will leave you questioning just how much the average person truly understands their rights. It's a fascinating look at the balance of power and how knowledge can tip the scales. Will the officer back down, or will the citizen's composure and legal know-how leave her no choice? Stick around as this encounter unfolds. You won't want to miss how it all ends. The situation begins like any other stop, routine, unremarkable. The officer approaches, asking for ID, expecting compliance without question. But the citizen, calm and collected, knows they don't have to show identification without cause. As the officer demands their ID, the citizen simply replies, "Am I being detained or free to go?" The officer, visibly taken aback by the question, tries to escalate, leaning on her authority, but the citizen remains unshaken. What's fascinating here is that the officer seems confident, but it quickly becomes clear she's not fully prepared for the legal knowledge being thrown her way. As the citizen calmly explains their rights, quoting specific laws, the officer begins to stumble. The tension builds. Each word from the citizen further challenges her authority, making her grow more agitated. The situation isn't just about a refusal to provide ID. It's about the citizen standing firm against what they perceive as overreach. The question now is, will the officer realize she's out of her depth, or will she double down? As the standoff continues, the officer's frustration starts to show. Her attempts to intimidate with vague threats of arrest fall flat, as the citizen calmly questions the legal basis for her actions. The officer shifts tactics, raising her voice, trying to assert dominance. "You're obstructing justice," she claims, but the citizen isn't fazed. Instead, they calmly explain that refusing to provide ID is not a crime unless there's probable cause for suspicion. Meanwhile, nearby pedestrians start to take notice, some filming the encounter, others whispering amongst themselves. The situation begins to draw a small crowd, and the officer becomes increasingly aware of the attention. She knows the pressure is building. Every move, every word she says could be scrutinized. The citizen, on the other hand, stands there with an air of quiet confidence, feeding off the momentum. It's a battle of control, and both parties are digging in their heels. Just when it seems like the officer might make a move, a second officer arrives on the scene, adding to the tension. Will they back up the first officer's claims, or will they offer a different perspective? The crowd watches intently, wondering which way the scales will tip. As the second officer steps onto the scene, the atmosphere shifts. The first officer immediately begins explaining the situation, almost as if seeking validation for her actions. But the second officer remains silent for a moment, observing the scene with a critical eye. The crowd falls quiet, sensing the growing tension. Every passing second feels heavier, and the question lingers in the air. Will this end peacefully, or is something more explosive about to happen? The first officer, still rattled, looks to the second officer for backup, but instead of jumping into the confrontation, the new officer calmly asks the citizen, "Are you being detained or free to go?" The citizen, with a steady voice, repeats their earlier statement, quoting a specific case law to back up their stance. The crowd's eyes widen, and you can almost hear a collective breath held, unsure of what will happen next. For a brief moment, the first officer's face goes pale, as if she's realizing she might be on the wrong side of this interaction. The second officer remains neutral, but it's clear they're taking in every word. The tension between the officers is palpable. Will they stand together, or will the second officer question the legality of the first officer's demands? Everyone's on edge, waiting for the next move. Just as the situation seems to hang in the balance, the second officer surprises everyone. Instead of supporting the first officer's stance, They turn to the crowd and address them directly, as if to shift the focus. "Let me just make something clear," they begin, their tone calm but firm. "We're here to do a job, but everyone has rights. We can't just ask for ID without reason." The first officer glares at their partner, clearly unsettled by this unexpected shift in direction. The crowd, who had been holding their breath, now whispers among themselves. The tension is so thick it's almost suffocating. The first officer, realizing she's losing control of the narrative, steps forward aggressively, demanding the citizen's ID once more. "This is your last chance," she warns, but it's clear her voice is wavering. The second officer remains calm, but something about their expression shifts. It's almost as if they're silently questioning the first officer's actions now. Just when it feels like the situation could escalate into something much worse, the first officer pulls out her radio, speaking rapidly into it, requesting backup. But there's something about her desperation that sends a chill through the crowd. Why the sudden call for backup? Could the situation really be turning against her? The air grows heavier as the distant sound of sirens begins to approach. Every person present knows that the stakes have just been raised. The sirens grow louder, signaling that backup is on the way, but just as the situation seems poised to erupt, the second officer steps forward, breaking the rising tension. "Hold on a second," they say to the first officer, their voice now more authoritative. "We need to reassess here." The first officer looks visibly torn, her face flushed with frustration, but she doesn't argue. The second officer turns to the citizen and gives a small nod. "You're right," they admit quietly, before adding, "You don't have to show your ID unless we have a legal reason to detain you." For a moment, everything stands still. The first officer stares at their partner in disbelief, clearly caught off guard by the sudden change in direction. The crowd, having witnessed the back and forth, begins to murmur in approval, sensing that the citizen's knowledge has won the day. Just as the tension starts to settle, a voice comes over the radio, something the first officer wasn't expecting. "Cancel the backup. The situation's resolved." The crowd is left in stunned silence as the first officer, now visibly deflated, steps back, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. The citizen, standing tall, calmly collects themselves and begins to walk away, no longer the center of attention. The second officer watches them go, a faint smile creeping onto their face. But as the citizen disappears from view, something unexpected happens. The first officer, her frustration mounting, turns and, for a brief moment, seems to consider confronting the citizen one last time. But before she can take a step, the second officer places a hand on her shoulder, gently stopping her. The first officer looks at her partner, and in that moment, something shifts. Without saying a word, they walk off together, leaving the citizen to continue on their way, unharmed, unshaken, and victorious. The crowd begins to disperse, still processing what just happened, but everyone knows they just witnessed something significant. It wasn't just a win for the citizen. It was a stark reminder of the power of knowledge and the importance of standing up for one's rights. As the crowd disperses, the atmosphere slowly returns to normal, but the ripple effect of the encounter lingers. The citizen, now free to go, walks away with her head held high, a quiet confidence radiating from them. They didn't just challenge authority, they proved the power of being informed and standing firm in the face of intimidation. It wasn't just about refusing to show ID, it was about pushing back against overreach, and they did it with calm, collected precision. Meanwhile, the first officer, still processing the events, shares a brief, heavy glance with her partner. The tension between them is palpable, but there's no confrontation. Instead, they walk off together, the unresolved conflict between them hanging in the air. Whether this encounter will change how they handle similar situations in the future remains to be seen, but the lesson has been delivered. For the audience, the story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of knowing your rights and the impact one informed citizen can have on an entire situation. It's a moment of clarity, one that will resonate long after the encounter ends.